Before he built the happiest place on earth, Walt Disney was broke, sleeping on office floors and surviving on canned beans. He had been fired for lacking imagination. His first studio went bankrupt, and his distributor had just stolen his most popular character. On paper, Walt Disney looked like a man chasing a dream that refused to come true. But what happened next didn't just save him. It quietly set off a chain reaction that would build one of the most powerful entertainment empires in history. And to understand how Disney went from repeated failure to global dominance, we need to rewind to the moment everything first fell apart. Before there was Mickey Mouse. Before theme parks, movies, or castles. Walt Disney was a kid who couldn't seem to fit anywhere. He was born in 1901 and grew up in a strict household. His father believed hard labor built character, so Walt spent his childhood delivering newspapers before sunrise. He hated it. What he loved instead was drawing. He would sketch animals, faces, and little scenes whenever he could steal a quiet moment. But liking art didn't mean anyone believed in it. As a young adult, Walt tried to turn his drawings into a career. His first real job was at a newspaper in Kansas City. It didn't last long. He was let go for lacking imagination. That sentence would have crushed most people. Instead, it quietly lit something inside him. Walt moved into animation, which at the time was barely even considered an industry. He co-founded a small studio and poured everything into it. Long hours, no pay, constant stress. And then the studio collapsed. He declared bankruptcy. At just 22 years old, Walt Disney had already failed publicly. Most people would have taken that as a sign to quit. But instead of giving up, Walt packed his bags and headed west to Hollywood, believing the next attempt would be different. He had no idea how hard Hollywood was about to hit him. When Walt arrived in Hollywood, the movie industry was booming. Studios were everywhere. Money was flowing. But animation? No one cared. Walt walked into office after office, pitching his ideas. Executives weren't impressed. Some said animation was a novelty that would never make real money. Others didn't even bother hearing him out. Finally, Walt and his brother Roy scraped together enough money to start another studio out of a tiny garage. They created a character named Oswald, the Lucky Rabbit. And this time, it worked. Oswald became popular. The cartoons sold well. Walt thought he had finally made it. Then came the meeting that almost ended everything. Walt traveled to New York to negotiate better terms with his distributor. He expected a raise. Instead, he was blindsided. The distributor revealed something devastating. They owned Oswald. They owned the team, and if Walt didn't accept lower pay, they would replace him. In one meeting, Walt lost his character, his animators, and the business he thought he controlled. He walked out with nothing. On the train ride back to California, Walt stared out the window, furious and humiliated. But somewhere during that ride, a new idea began to form. And that idea would change everything. During that train ride, Walt began sketching. Not a rabbit, something simpler, friendlier, a mouse. When Walt returned, he and a small team poured everything into this new character. They were broke. The studio was on the edge of collapse. If this failed, there would be no next attempt. They called the mouse Mickey. The first cartoons didn't get much attention. Studios weren't interested. Money kept running out. Then Walt made a risky decision that everyone warned him against. He decided to add sound. At the time, animation with synchronized sound was expensive and complicated. Most studios avoided it. Walt ignored the warnings and went all in. When Steamboat Willie premiered, audiences were stunned. The sound, the timing, the personality. Mickey Mouse wasn't just a cartoon. He felt alive. Overnight, Disney had a hit. But success brought a new problem, and this one nearly destroyed the company from the inside. As Mickey grew more popular, the studio expanded fast. Animators worked long hours under intense pressure. Walt demanded perfection. He micromanaged everything. Resentment started to build. In 1941, it exploded. Disney animators went on strike. They protested pay, working conditions, and creative control. Walt felt personally betrayed. These were people he believed he had given everything to. The strike became public. Newspapers covered it. Disney's reputation took a hit. Projects were delayed. Money dried up. At the same time, Walt had just released Fantasia, a film he believed would redefine animation. It didn't. The movie was too expensive and didn't make enough money back. The studio was bleeding cash. Some people believed Disney was finished. But instead of scaling back, Walt did the opposite. He took another massive gamble. And this one would reshape not just his company, but childhood itself. Walt had a vision no one else understood. He wanted to build a park, not a carnival, not a fair. A clean, immersive world where families could step inside stories. Investors thought he was out of his mind. Banks refused to fund it. Advisors warned him it would bankrupt the company. Even his own team wasn't sure. So Walt did something desperate. He mortgaged everything to build Disneyland, his house, his life insurance, his future. When Disneyland opened in 1955, it was chaos. Rides broke down within hours. Food vendors ran out of supplies. The asphalt was so fresh that women's shoes sank into the ground. The press called it a disaster. But Walt Disney didn't see failure. He saw data. Unlike other park owners, Walt didn't treat Disneyland like a finished product. He treated it like a living experiment. From the very first week, he walked the park constantly, watching how people moved, where they stopped, what confused them, and what made them smile. Then, he started changing things. One of Walt's biggest insights was something no amusement park had ever prioritized before: story. Most parks at the time were just collections of rides. Disney flipped that idea completely. Every land in Disneyland had a clear identity. Frontierland felt like the Wild West. Tomorrowland felt like the future. Fantasyland felt like stepping inside a fairy tale. Nothing was random. Even trash cans were placed exactly 30 steps apart, because Walt noticed that people would hold trash for about that long before dropping it. Cleanliness wasn't just about hygiene. It was about immersion. If the park felt fake or messy, the illusion broke. Then came the rides. Walt hated rides that were just fast or loud. He wanted experiences. Pirates of the Caribbean wasn't just a boat ride. It had characters, scenes, pacing, and music. Haunted Mansion wasn't meant to scare people. It was designed to make them curious, amused, and just uncomfortable enough to feel real. But the real genius move came next. Walt realized the park itself could sell stories, not just tickets. Characters didn't stay on screens anymore. Mickey walked the streets. Employees weren't workers, they were cast members. Guests weren't customers, they were guests. Even areas off-limits to visitors were called backstage. Language mattered, because mindset mattered. And this thinking quietly changed everything about how theme parks operated. But Walt still wasn't satisfied, because in his mind, Disneyland was too small, and his next idea would be so ambitious that many thought it would collapse the company all over again. While Disneyland was thriving, Walt Disney became obsessed with a much bigger vision. He didn't just want another park. He wanted to build a city. Walt believed cities were broken. Traffic, pollution, poor design. He thought the same principles that made Disneyland work, flow, cleanliness, storytelling, and control, could be applied to real life. That idea became EPCOT. Originally, EPCOT wasn't meant to be a theme park at all. It stood for the Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow, a planned city where technology, transportation, and community design would constantly evolve. To make this possible, Walt made one of the smartest business moves of his life. Disney quietly bought thousands of acres of land in Florida using fake company names. If people knew Disney was buying, land prices would have exploded. By the time the truth came out, Disney controlled an area larger than San Francisco. This land ownership changed everything. Unlike Disneyland, which was boxed in by surrounding businesses, Disney World would be fully controlled. Roads, hotels, transportation, zoning, all under Disney's authority. This allowed the company to design the guest experience from the moment people arrived in Florida. No ugly highways, no competing signs, no broken illusion. Even the monorail wasn't just transportation. It was a ride, a preview of the future, a moving billboard that said, "This place is different." Walt passed away before EPCOT could be built as he imagined, but the philosophy remained. Disney World became more than a park. It became a destination. Families didn't just visit for a day. They stayed for a week, then 2, then came back again. And that repeat behavior turned Disney parks into one of the most reliable revenue engines in entertainment history. What started as a risky, mocked experiment became a system so refined that competitors spent decades trying and failing to copy it. Walt Disney didn't win because he made rides. He won because he understood people. He understood that humans don't want thrills alone. They want stories. They want worlds. They want to feel like they've stepped somewhere else. Disneyland wasn't successful because it was perfect on day one. It was successful because Walt never stopped fixing it. What do you think mattered more, Walt Disney's imagination or his ability to survive failure? And here's something most people don't realize. Mickey Mouse didn't just save Disney. In a strange and unexpected way, it also helped save Nintendo. If you want to understand how a struggling Japanese card company survived, reinvented itself, and ended up building one of the most iconic entertainment brands in history, click on the next video. It's the perfect story to watch after this one. And I'll see you there.